What if everything you believed in turned out to be a lie? What if the system you dedicated your life to, sacrificed sleep, sanity, and personal dreams for, wasn't just broken, but actively hurting the very people it was meant to help? Emma Carter sat on the worn edge of her twin mattress, her back hunched, staring at the flickering screen of her aging laptop. It was past midnight. The room smelled faintly of burnt toast and old textbooks. Ethan, her 10-year-old son, was asleep in the next room, probably dreaming of something better than this small apartment above a boarded-up hardware store in Akron, Ohio. On her screen, a video played on loop, Elon Musk at a tech summit, speaking with sharp certainty into a handheld mic. Traditional education is a relic. It was designed for a different era. Kids aren't being taught to think, they're being taught to obey. The crowd applauded. Emma blinked, then clicked replay. Again. And again. There was something in the way he said it. Not arrogance, but clarity. Like he'd dared to say out loud what she'd only whispered to herself on the worst days in the teacher's lounge. She taught 6th grade at Wilson Middle School, or had, until 2 weeks ago. Now she was on indefinite leave following what the school district had called an incident. That word echoed in her mind, heavy and full of shame. The incident wasn't some major scandal. It wasn't drugs or cheating or theft. It was a chair. A literal chair. One student, Tyrell, had hurled it at another during her math lesson. It missed the target but shattered the classroom window. No one was seriously hurt, but the clip had gone viral, and Emma had been caught in the frame, frozen mid-scream. The school board decided she needed time to reflect, which was code for, we need someone to blame. She didn't fight it. Maybe she was tired of fighting. Teaching used to mean something to her. It used to feel like a calling. But now? She felt more like a warden than an educator, trapped in a system that cared more about test scores than kids. She leaned back, her neck stiff. On her phone, she scrolled through comments under the Musk video. Thousands of likes. Thousands of shares. Arguments broke out in real time between teachers, parents, engineers, and high school students. Some said he was wrong, idealistic, disconnected. Others said he was right. Painfully right. She clicked into the comment box, typed slowly, as a public school teacher for 11 years, I wish I could disagree with him. But I can't. The system is broken. It breaks teachers. It breaks kids. She hesitated, then hit send. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. 10 likes. Then 20. Then her comment was being shared. A stranger replied, this. Exactly this. Another added, tell us more. Emma set the phone down, heart racing. She wasn't used to being heard. Certainly not like this. She got up, checked on Ethan, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm, and tiptoed back to the living room. She opened a Word doc, the cursor blinking, daring her to speak. What did she want to say? That her students weren't lazy, they were exhausted. That they weren't failing, they were surviving. That she'd seen brilliance crushed under bureaucracy. That she'd cried in her car more times than she could count. Her fingers hovered. Then typed, my name is Emma Carter. I used to believe in the classroom. Now, I'm not so sure. Her phone buzzed again. A new message request, from someone named Julian Vega. She clicked. His profile read, Director of Community Innovation, ThinkForge. She frowned. That sounded made up. But the message was short and specific, Emma, read your comment. We're building something new. Would love your perspective. Call me. She stared at the screen. A scam? A prank? She Googled ThinkForge. Real company. Funded by a venture arm loosely tied to Tesla and SpaceX. They were working on experimental learning platforms, apparently. Perspective, she murmured. They want my perspective? She hadn't felt valuable in months. Years, maybe. She hesitated, then typed back, "Sure." When? The response came almost instantly, "Tomorrow." Zoom. Noon. She typed, "Yes," before she could talk herself out of it. When she closed her laptop that night, the city was silent. No car horns. No late-night sirens. Just the sound of wind against the glass. For the first time in a long time, Emma didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning, she dressed in her best blazer, worn at the elbows but still professional. Ethan, crunching cereal, asked, "Why are you dressed like that?" She smiled. "I've got a meeting." He raised an eyebrow. "With who?" She hesitated. "A tech company. They want to talk about education." He blinked. "Do they know you're a teacher?" She laughed softly. "I think that's why they want me." The Zoom call was a blur of faces and fast talk. Julian was young, mid-30s, with wild hair and the kind of enthusiasm that could sell anything. Behind him, a wall of whiteboards was scrawled with equations and colorful post-its. "We're building a new platform," he said. "AI-assisted, project-based, gamified. But we don't have real teachers. We need someone who's lived it." "You." Emma listened, skeptical but intrigued. They weren't asking her to sell out. They were asking her to help fix what was broken. By the end of the call, she had a plane ticket. San Francisco. ThinkForge HQ, tomorrow. Ethan's eyes widened when she told him. "You're really going?" She nodded. "It's just a few days. Your grandma's coming to stay." He looked away. "Is it because of the chair thing?" Emma's chest tightened. "No," she said gently. "It's because something might be changing. Something good." That night, she packed a borrowed suitcase. Folded her resume into a manila folder. Printed out lesson plans she was proud of. And tucked in the drawing Ethan had made of them, stick figures standing under a bright yellow sun, labeled, "Me and Mom Against the World." Before bed, she stared at the ceiling. Thought about the millions of teachers like her. The millions of kids like Ethan. The millions of moments where something better could have happened, but didn't. She whispered, "Let this be something better." The plane ride was bumpy. The taxi from SFO smelled like burnt coffee. But when she stepped into the ThinkForge offices, her breath caught. Glass walls. Floating screens. Kids in lab coats testing VR headsets. A 10-year-old girl giving a TED-style talk to a group of engineers. Emma thought, this isn't school. This is the future. Julian greeted her like an old friend. Introduced her to the team. Everyone was buzzing with ideas. But Emma noticed what they lacked. Grounding. Real-world experience. A sense of how a kid's trauma shows up in math class. She spoke up. Told them what it was really like. They listened. Not politely, intensely. Like it mattered. At the end of the day, Julian asked, "Would you consider consulting? Help us shape this into something real?" Emma paused. Then nodded. "On one condition," she said. "You don't forget who this is for." He smiled. "We won't." That night, in a hotel room with soft sheets and city lights, Emma opened her laptop and saw her comment had reached 50,000 likes. She clicked into her inbox, flooded with messages. Some hateful. Most hopeful. A teacher from Kansas wrote, "You're saying what we're all too scared to admit." A mother from Florida wrote, "My son is drowning in school. Please keep going." Emma looked out the window. She felt something shift. Not just in the world, but in her. Maybe she wasn't just a teacher. Maybe she was a builder now. Of something better. Of something brave. She opened a new doc. Typed 4 words, let's begin the rebuild. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma Carter had once believed the classroom was sacred, a place where transformation happened, where young minds grew and hope took root, but over the years that belief had been worn thin by chipped paint, broken heating systems, standardized test mandates, and exhausted colleagues who no longer spoke of dreams but only survival. Her journey to this moment, this strange, electric possibility of building something new with ThinkForge, had been long, painful, and packed with contradictions. It started back in 2009 when she walked into her first classroom at Jefferson Elementary in Akron, Ohio, heart pounding with a combination of nerves and purpose. She'd prepared for it for years, had carefully organized her desk, written the week's objectives in neat handwriting across the whiteboard, and looked into the eyes of 26 fifth graders who ranged from wide-eyed curiosity to wary defiance. She remembered telling herself, "I'll reach them all," and believing it. Those first few years were full of passion and chaos. Sleepless nights creating hands-on lesson plans, crying quietly in the teacher's bathroom after a student cursed her out, cheering when one of her most difficult students finally aced a science quiz, staying late to attend basketball games and talent shows because she knew half her kids had no one else in the audience. Emma had always wanted to be the kind of teacher she never had growing up, someone who saw kids not as data points but as complicated, incredible stories waiting to be told. Her childhood had been a blur of missed assignments and late-night fights between her parents. Her father, an auto mechanic who never made it past high school, had once told her, "School's not for people like us. You gotta work, not dream." That had stuck with her like a thorn under the skin, and teaching had been her rebellion against that kind of thinking, a way to prove that knowledge could be more than survival, that it could be salvation. But the years changed her. Slowly, silently. Budget cuts led to larger class sizes. Innovative curriculum ideas were met with bureaucratic resistance. The joy of teaching was replaced with performance metrics, lesson audits, and endless forms to justify every deviation from the rigid pacing guide. She was constantly reminded not to fall behind, not to go off script, not to get too creative, as if creativity were a liability instead of a gift. The divorce hadn't helped. Jeremy had been supportive in theory but absent in practice. He liked the idea of being married to a teacher but couldn't handle the long nights or emotional weight she carried home. When Ethan was born, Emma thought things might change, but instead, they cracked. Jeremy walked out when Ethan was 5, leaving behind a trail of unpaid bills and a hollow silence that echoed through their small home. Emma became everything at once: mother, father, provider, counselor, disciplinarian, and still, somehow, teacher. Her mornings began at 5 with coffee and lesson planning, her days were spent managing behaviors and redirecting chaos, and her nights were filled with grading, grocery budgeting, and Ethan's relentless questions about the universe. He was a curious kid, endlessly fascinated by space and coding, always asking how things worked, why things were the way they were. He hated school. Couldn't stand it. Said it made him feel small. Emma tried to encourage him, tried to make learning feel like an adventure at home, but she understood. School didn't reward curiosity, it punished deviation. When her father died 3 years ago, something in Emma shut down. The grief was heavy, but it wasn't just about loss. It was about the realization that time was finite, that she could keep sacrificing herself for a system that didn't love her back, or she could start asking different questions. Like, what if education didn't have to look like this? What if desks, bells, and multiple-choice tests weren't necessary? What if she'd been teaching inside a box someone else built, and maybe it was time to break it down? Her colleagues didn't want to hear that. Even the ones she considered close friends looked at her funny when she suggested alternative learning models or questioned the obsession with grade levels. "Emma," one of them whispered, "we're all tired, but don't go full Elon Musk on us." She'd laughed at the time, brushing it off. But now she was literally being invited to do exactly that. And it scared her. The excitement of ThinkForge, the speed of innovation, the possibility of building a platform from scratch, it all felt intoxicating. But also dangerous. Because ideas were easy. Implementation was hell. And these people, with their fast-talking optimism and seed funding, didn't seem to understand how messy real classrooms were, how trauma showed up in the way a student refused to open a book, how hunger looked like disrespect, how systems of racism and poverty seeped into every corner of public education. On her second day in San Francisco, Emma sat in a design lab surrounded by 20-something engineers arguing about gamification algorithms. She raised her hand. What happens if a student doesn't have internet at home? Silence. A few blinked. One young guy with glasses finally said, "We're assuming all users have connectivity." Emma exhaled slowly. Then your assumption excludes half the kids I've taught. Another time, they showed her a prototype lesson that used VR goggles to simulate planetary motion. It was beautiful, sleek, immersive. But when she asked how a classroom with one teacher and 30 students was supposed to afford even one headset, let alone 30, Julian admitted, "We haven't figured out the hardware cost structure yet." Emma didn't slam the idea. Instead, she leaned forward and told them about Marcus, one of her former students who could name every moon of Jupiter from memory but couldn't afford a winter coat. She described how he'd rigged a makeshift telescope from dollar store lenses and duct tape. "You want to engage kids like him," she said. "Start by honoring their reality." That afternoon, Julian pulled her aside. "Emma, I know this feels disconnected, but we're trying. We really are." She nodded. "Then listen harder. And go slower." He smiled, humbled. "That's why we brought you in." Slowly, she began to shape the direction of the platform. She proposed integrating community-based projects instead of abstract assignments. Suggested giving students choice over what problems they solved, letting them vote on real-world missions, designing clean water systems, writing ethical AI protocols, building apps that mattered. She helped them build an empathy layer. Real stories from real kids, video clips from schools around the country showing what learning looked like under stress, in brilliance, with heartbreak and hope tangled together. Late one night, after 12 hours in the lab, Julian handed her a bottle of water and said, "This is working because of you." Emma shook her head. "It's working because you let it get messy." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" She smiled. "It's the highest one I've got." Back in Ohio, Ethan was keeping track of it all. They FaceTimed nightly, and he asked for updates like it was a TV show. "Did they listen to you today?" "Yeah, a little more." "Did you tell them kids aren't robots?" "That was the first thing I said." "Good." He grinned. "Because I'm not a robot." She missed him so much it ached, but something else bloomed beneath the ache, pride. Because she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building. For him. For every kid who'd ever sat in her classroom with potential spilling out of their eyes and nowhere for it to go. The past still haunted her, failures, missed moments, students she couldn't save, but it also fueled her. And maybe that was the point. To take the pain and make something better with it. On her last day in San Francisco, Julian surprised her with a gift, a ThinkForge hoodie in her size and a small plaque that read, "Architect of Orion." "What's Orion?" she asked. "The name of our pilot school," he said. "We want you to run it." She stared. "You're serious?" "You're the blueprint." She clutched the plaque. Thought of her dad. Of Ethan. Of the chair flying through the air. And whispered, "Okay. Let's build a school." The sky was pink with sunset as her plane lifted off. Somewhere down there was the old world. Somewhere ahead was something new. And she was flying straight into it. The snow hadn't started falling yet, but the sky over Akron looked like it might collapse at any minute, gray and pressed low like a ceiling just waiting to give way, and Emma Carter felt every inch of it pressing down on her chest as she stepped off the shuttle bus, suitcase in hand, and walked back into her small apartment, where Ethan sat cross-legged on the couch with his hoodie pulled over his head and a laptop balanced on his knees, eyes flicking up only briefly to say, "Hey, Mom," before returning to whatever digital universe he was lost in, and for a second Emma just stood there, letting the door swing closed behind her, watching him, feeling the surreal weight of the week she'd just lived. Think Forge, Julian, the Orion proposal, Elon Musk's name floating like a comet over everything, and suddenly all of it felt impossibly far away, like a dream she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. "How was it?" Ethan asked, not looking up this time. "It was," she hesitated, dropped her bag by the door, and joined him on the couch, "big." He glanced over. "You mean, like, good big or scary big?" "Both," she said, exhaling, "they want me to build a school." That got his attention. "Wait, like be the principal?" "Not exactly," she said, "more like the designer. The architect. They want to pilot a new model, and they want me to lead it." Ethan's eyes lit up in a way she hadn't seen in months. "You mean like the stuff you were telling me? No desks, no homework, real projects?" "Exactly that," she said, unable to stop the smile from spreading across her face. "They're calling it Orion." He nodded slowly. "That's a cool name. Sounds like a spaceship." "That's the point," she said, "a school that launches you somewhere." And just like that, for the first time in a long time, they sat in silence that didn't feel heavy, that wasn't laced with worry or tension or exhaustion, just quiet possibility humming in the air between them. But the high didn't last long. By the next morning, the reality of returning to her old life while quietly building a new one set in like a dull headache behind her eyes. She was still technically suspended from Wilson Middle School, still receiving half pay, still listed as an employee under review, and when she walked into the grocery store later that day, she could feel the eyes on her, the parents who'd seen the video, the colleagues who'd heard the rumors, the cashier who paused a little too long before asking how she was doing. Akron was a small place when you were the center of a scandal. She tried to brush it off, focus on the Orion proposal, but even that wasn't simple. Think Forge had ideas, yes, but no infrastructure. They needed a building, a team, a pilot group of students, and someone willing to publicly back a model that didn't include grades, GPAs, or standardized tests. And even though Emma had been named the architect, it quickly became clear that she was also the recruiter, administrator, public relations lead, and general contractor all rolled into one. Julian sent over a basic framework, project-based learning modules, a partnership with a software firm for student AI assistance, and a loose schedule that left entire afternoons open for self-guided inquiry. "What about state standards?" she asked during one of their late-night calls. Julian was quiet for a second, then said, "We're working on getting a waiver. Innovation charter." "And what if the waiver doesn't come?" she pressed. "Then we go rogue," he said, laughing, but Emma didn't laugh back. Because going rogue might sound cool in a boardroom, but in the real world it meant lawsuits, truancy charges, media backlash, and possibly the end of her career if things fell apart. She couldn't afford for things to fall apart. Not now. Still, she moved forward. Quietly, carefully. She reached out to a retired principal she trusted, asked about unused buildings in the district, and found a former vocational center on the east side, empty since the pandemic, dusty but salvageable. She drove there one afternoon and walked through the silent halls, imagining whiteboards replaced by glass walls, desks swapped out for maker tables and beanbags, fluorescent lights dimmed in favor of skylights and open ceilings. It was possible. She could see it. She made a list of students she remembered, kids who didn't fit the mold but still had spark, kids who'd been punished for asking questions, for being too loud, too smart, too curious. She made another list of teachers, the ones who hadn't given up yet, who still brought energy into the room no matter how broken the system felt. She sent emails. A few bounced back. A few said no. But a few said yes. Yes, I'm in. Yes, I've been waiting for something like this. Yes, I'm tired of pretending this works. And that was enough. But then the district caught wind of it. A formal letter arrived in her mailbox on a Thursday, sealed in a heavy manila envelope and stamped with the school board's logo. It was cold and full of legal language, essentially a cease and desist warning wrapped in concern. It has come to our attention that you are engaging in unauthorized educational programming outside the scope of your current employment status, it read, and Emma could feel her heartbeat accelerate as she read on. Any continued efforts to recruit students or utilize district property without approval may result in legal action. She stood in her kitchen, letter in hand, the walls feeling like they were closing in, and for the briefest moment she wondered if she should just stop, pull back, wait for someone more powerful to take the lead. But then Ethan walked in, earbuds out, and said, "What's that?" She crumpled the letter in one hand. "Nothing that's gonna stop me." That night, she called Julian and told him everything. "We need to go public," she said. "No more quiet planning. We launch. Loud." Julian hesitated. "Are you sure? Once we go public, there's no going back." "I wasn't meant to go back," she said. "And neither were these kids." The next day, she recorded a video on her phone, just her sitting at her kitchen table, speaking directly into the lens. "My name is Emma Carter," she began, "and I've been a teacher in Ohio for over a decade. I've loved it. I've hated it. I've fought for it. But now I'm building something new, a school that's not based on grades, but on growth. Not on memorization, but on meaning. We call it Orion. And it's for every kid who's ever felt left behind by the system. If that's your child, or if that was you, I hope you'll join us." She posted it with the hashtag Orion School. By morning, it had 20,000 views. By afternoon, a local news outlet picked it up. By nightfall, she had 3 voicemails from journalists, 2 from angry district officials, and 1 from a parent sobbing, "Thank you for saying what we've all been thinking." The movement had started. And it wasn't going to stop. The letters kept coming, emails from parents, texts from teachers she hadn't spoken to in years, Facebook messages from strangers across the country who saw the video and said they felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Emma Carter sat at her kitchen table, the same place she'd filmed the Orion announcement video just 5 days earlier, and watched the numbers rise on the screen: views, shares, comments, donations. Yes, donations. Julian had set up a crowdfunding campaign through ThinkForge the day the video launched, and it passed $100,000 in 48 hours. Small amounts mostly, $10, $25, sometimes $50 with messages attached like, "I wish this school had existed when I was a kid," or "My daughter deserves better than worksheets and stress." But they added up. And the momentum was unmistakable. The school board doubled down, of course. A second letter arrived, this time thicker, with more signatures. It accused Emma of violating her employment agreement, inciting public dissent, misrepresenting the district's priorities, and acting without official sanction. Julian's legal team drafted a response that was professional and firm, citing charter innovation statutes and First Amendment protections. "They can't actually stop you," he told her over the phone, "but they can scare you. That's the play." Emma wasn't scared anymore. Not because she was fearless, but because she was too deep in it now to turn around. Fear had already cost her too much: her energy, her joy, her belief in herself. She wasn't going to let it take Orion, too. The vocational building on East 47th officially became theirs after a lease agreement was signed with the city, thanks in part to a sympathetic councilwoman who'd seen Emma's video and whose nephew had dropped out of school in 10th grade. The building was old, but solid. Big open rooms that once housed auto shop equipment and metalworking tools now stood empty, waiting to be reborn as classrooms without walls. Emma toured it with Ethan on a Saturday morning. Sunlight streamed through cracked skylights, illuminating dust in golden swirls, and Ethan walked through the halls like he was exploring a spaceship. "This place is huge," he said, spinning in slow circles. "It smells like a garage." "That's because it used to be one," she smiled. "What do you think?" He shrugged, trying to act cool. "I think it's awesome." She hadn't told him yet that he'd be one of the first students. That was the next conversation. She worried it might feel like an experiment to him, but in truth, Ethan had been part of this since the beginning. The very reason it existed. That afternoon, volunteers arrived, former teachers, retired engineers, graphic designers, parents, even a few high school seniors who said they were tired of sitting still and pretending to care. They swept, painted, cleaned windows, hauled out broken cabinets. Someone brought pizza. Someone else played music. It didn't feel like school. It felt like a movement. And Emma, still wearing her Architect of Orion hoodie, led the charge. She wasn't the boss, exactly. But she was the reason they all showed up. She kept thinking about a quote she'd seen once: "The revolution will not be standardized." It stayed with her. A mantra. A battle cry. The first teacher to officially sign on was Mrs. Rainey, her old colleague from Wilson Middle, a powerhouse of a woman who once taught science with such fire that students swore they could feel heat coming off the textbook. "I've been waiting for someone to say out loud what we all whisper in the copy room," Rainey said when Emma called her. "Let's do it." Then came Mr. Walters, who brought his guitar to school every Friday and taught history through protest songs. Then came Grace, a 24-year-old robotics mentor from a local makerspace, who asked if she could teach part-time and lead a project on AI and ethics. Emma said yes. That was her favorite word now. Yes to the kid who wanted to build his own comic book series for a literacy credit. Yes to the mother who asked if she could teach a unit on urban gardening. Yes to the retired coder who offered to come in once a week and teach Python to anyone who wanted to learn. Orion wasn't about subjects, not in the traditional sense. It was about questions. Challenges. Missions. Each student chose a personal constellation, a series of linked goals across disciplines, connected by their interests and passions. A kid interested in climate change could combine data science, journalism, and public speaking to create a campaign. A student obsessed with video games could study storytelling, coding, and math through a game design project. There were still benchmarks. Still goals. But they weren't tied to grades. They were tied to mastery, real understanding, real outcomes. Every student had a mentor. Every week included one-on-one check-ins. No detention. No bells. No rigid periods. Just blocks of time and space to learn, make, test, and revise. They used AI not to replace teachers, but to assist them. Chatbots help students organize their tasks, suggest sources, run simulations. Ethan loved it. "It's like having a smart older brother who never gets tired," he said. Emma was surprised how quickly he adapted. How much more curious he became when no one was forcing him to care. He spent hours building a model of Mars using 3D software and narrated a video explaining his plan to terraform a section of it using algae. "Do you think this could actually work?" he asked one night at dinner. Emma smiled. "I don't know. But the fact that you're asking means something's working." The backlash didn't disappear. Local media ran stories with headlines like "Teacher Goes Rogue" and "Unlicensed Learning." The district tried to stir up panic, claiming Orion was unsafe, untested, unethical. But for every critic, 10 more people came forward in support. Elon Musk hadn't commented directly, but someone from Neuralink reached out with an invitation for Emma to tour their education division in Austin. "They're watching," Julian said. "All of them." And yet Emma didn't feel like a celebrity. She felt like a soldier. Each day was a new battle, fixing leaks in the ceiling, navigating legal gray zones, mediating between passionate but clashing personalities. But at night, she slept. Deeply. Fully. For the first time in years. And when she woke up, she looked forward to what came next. Opening day was set for March 15th. Just 40 students to start. 40 pioneers. 40 kids and teens who didn't fit anywhere else, who now had a place built just for them. The night before, Emma walked the halls alone. Posters were up. Floors polished. Every wall painted in bold colors, no beige in sight. In the central space, a mural read, "What if school was designed for humans?" She stared at it for a long time. Remembered Tyrell and the chair. Remembered the silent judgment in the staff meetings. Remembered every time she thought of quitting. And then she remembered that girl in San Francisco, giving a TED talk at age 10 in front of engineers. Orion could be that spark. Not the final solution. Not the end-all be-all. But a spark. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the doors opened. And 40 students walked in. It didn't start with fireworks or a triumphant speech, just the quiet shuffle of sneakers on tile and the buzz of nervous voices as 40 kids filed into a school that looked nothing like the schools they were used to, no metal detectors, no teachers barking at them to tuck in their shirts, no lines of lockers, no assigned seats, and most importantly, no fear. Emma Carter stood at the main entrance of Orion, her heart pounding in rhythm with the low hum of the building's lights, greeting each student by name, because she'd made sure to memorize all of them in the weeks leading up to opening day. Ethan was first, of course, wearing his ThinkForge hoodie and pretending not to be excited, though the slight bounce in his step gave him away. Behind him came Aria, who'd been labeled disruptive in her old school for always asking too many questions. Next was Malik, tall and quiet, who used to skip class because, according to his last counselor, he didn't feel seen. There was Sophia, whose test anxiety was so severe she once fainted during a math final, and Lucas, a shy coder with a stutter who hadn't spoken in class since the 3rd grade. They were all different. Different backgrounds, different skills, different scars. But every one of them was there because they'd stopped believing the system could help them. And now, for the first time, something new had shown up. Emma gathered them in the large open atrium and welcomed them, not with a lecture but a question: what would school look like if you built it yourself? She let the silence stretch for a moment, then added, because that's what we're doing here. Together. She walked them through the basics, how the space worked, how they'd be creating their own constellations of learning goals, how they'd be using AI assistants and real-world projects instead of tests and grades. She introduced the mentors one by one, and instead of reciting their qualifications, she asked each of them to share a mistake they'd made in life and what they learned from it. The students looked surprised, even a little uncomfortable, but then Mrs. Rainey told a story about getting fired from her first job for missing deadlines and how it taught her the difference between passion and discipline. Mr. Walters admitted that he used to hate history until he realized it was made up of stories people weren't allowed to tell. Grace described a failed robotics competition where everything short-circuited, but the team still won an award for resilience. "We're not here to measure how good you are at school," Emma told them, "we're here to find out how far you can go when school isn't in your way." And just like that, it began. There were hiccups, of course. The first week was full of them. One of the AI assistants crashed and recommended the same YouTube video to 5 different students regardless of topic. The 3D printer jammed. The Wi-Fi went down for 3 hours and a student tried to convince everyone it was a sign to go home. Someone spilled an entire smoothie on a pile of donated iPads. One of the projects, a drone photography mission, accidentally sent a quadcopter into a neighbor's backyard where it crashed into a birdbath, shattering it. Emma personally drove over that afternoon to apologize and pay for the damage. But for every mess, something extraordinary happened. Aria launched a podcast interviewing other students about why they left their old schools. Malik built a prototype app that helped students track their mental energy throughout the day with simple color-coded inputs. Sophia co-led a workshop on managing anxiety using breathwork and digital journaling. Lucas, the boy who didn't speak, wrote a piece of code that helped organize student projects into visual timelines, and when Grace read it aloud during a team meeting, he smiled for the first time anyone could remember. The parents were cautious at first, then intrigued. They attended the first open house looking for holes to poke and left asking if their younger children could enroll too. Emma answered every question, no matter how repetitive or skeptical. She knew what it meant to be unsure. She'd lived in that space for years. But now she was watching something bloom in real time, and it was too beautiful to doubt. Julian flew in from San Francisco after the second week, walking the halls like a proud sibling. "You did it," he said, shaking his head. "You actually did it." Emma smiled. "We're just getting started." He pulled her aside later and showed her something on his phone, a short video Musk had posted on X, formerly Twitter, a 15-second clip of Emma's Orion welcome speech followed by a caption that read, "This is what education should feel like. The future doesn't fit in rows of desks." The clip had already been viewed over 4 million times. Emma blinked. He saw it. Julian nodded. He reposted it himself. "This thing is bigger than you realize." Within a week, reporters were requesting interviews. Education podcasts. A Netflix documentary scout. Even a producer from a major morning show. Emma said no to most of them. "I'm not here to be famous," she told Julian. "I'm here to build." But the attention brought more than just headlines. Applications to Orion doubled, then tripled. By the end of the month, they had over 500 inquiries for the fall cohort. Julian began whispering about expansion, other cities, replication models. "Not yet," Emma said. "Let us grow roots before we grow wings." Despite the success, not everything was smooth. A parent accused the school of indoctrinating kids with tech propaganda and threatened to pull her son out unless they used more textbooks. One mentor quit after a student challenged his teaching method during a public presentation. A local politician tweeted that Orion was a Silicon Valley thought experiment dressed up as equity, and vowed to introduce legislation limiting unaccredited schools from using public resources. Emma didn't flinch. She held meetings. She listened. She adjusted when necessary, but never compromised the core. Orion wasn't about tech. It was about trust. It was about what happened when you gave kids real power over their learning. That month, Ethan gave his first public presentation. He stood in front of the entire Orion cohort and explained his Mars terraforming model, complete with diagrams, simulations, and a proposal for a NASA mentorship connection. Emma sat in the back, her hands trembling, heart aching with pride. When he finished, the room erupted in applause, and he looked directly at her. Just a glance. But it said everything. Afterward, he walked up and hugged her, not the quick, embarrassed kind he used to give when he was little, but a real one. "Thanks, Mom," he whispered. "For building this." She didn't say anything. Just held him. That night, as they sat on the couch eating leftover pizza, Ethan asked, "Do you think other schools will copy us?" Emma looked at him. "I hope so." He nodded. They should. Outside, snow was falling. The sky was soft and silent, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt like the world was finally listening. They called it the Orion Effect. It started as a nickname in an education forum, a thread where a teacher in Portland shared how she was redesigning her classroom into flexible workstations after watching a clip from Emma's school. Then came the blog post from a Minnesota principal who eliminated detention in favor of project-based problem-solving circles. Then a viral TikTok from a group of seniors in New Jersey who created their own Constellation learning model and convinced their school to pilot it for one semester. Within weeks, the phrase Orion Effect was trending in academic circles, and not just in the U.S. A school in Finland reached out for collaboration, followed by a startup-funded learning center in Nairobi, and a small experimental academy in Tokyo looking to adapt the self-guided model into their curriculum. Emma was overwhelmed, honored, and also increasingly aware of how fast things were moving. Julian kept calling it a moment of disruption, that Silicon Valley buzzword that usually made Emma's skin crawl, but now actually meant something tangible. Disruption wasn't just a pitch deck anymore. It was a building full of kids who had once felt invisible and now felt like architects of their own futures. It was real, but it was also fragile. Because underneath the praise and attention, there were cracks, tiny stress fractures forming from too much weight too quickly. The demand for Orion was growing exponentially. They were only 6 weeks into their first term, and already Emma was fielding requests to open 2 more satellite programs, one in Chicago and one in Atlanta. ThinkForge had started drafting scale-up models. Investors were circling. Elon Musk himself hadn't said more publicly, but a discreet message from one of his team members arrived in Emma's inbox inviting her to visit a SpaceX training simulation lab in Texas and speak with the team developing autonomous learning for long-duration spaceflight. It sounded surreal. Like science fiction. But Emma couldn't stop thinking about the kids. About what this would mean for them. And more urgently, what would happen if they scaled too fast and broke what they hadn't yet finished building. Ethan was thriving, but not without his own challenges. He was a perfectionist by nature, and with Orion's open-ended model, he often got stuck trying to make things too big, too perfect, too fast. He revised his Mars project 3 times in 2 weeks, scrapping hours of work each time. One night Emma found him staring at his screen, eyes red, voice flat. "It's never good enough," he said. "Not for what it could be." She sat next to him and said quietly, "It's not about perfect. It's about real. It's about trying something that matters to you." He nodded, but she could tell it was still eating at him. That was one of the hidden dangers of freedom. It demanded self-regulation, something traditional schools had never taught. The same applied to mentors. Some thrived in the open model. Others floundered. Grace was doing amazing things with her AI ethics cohort, but Mr. Walters confessed during a staff circle that he missed the structure of the old model sometimes. "I know this works," he said, "but some days I feel like I'm just floating. Like I don't know what I'm anchoring to." Emma nodded. "You're anchoring to them," she said, gesturing toward the student wing. "That's the point. Not the system. Not the schedule. The students. The questions." He smiled faintly, but she knew it would be a learning curve for everyone, not just the kids. Then came the invitation. A global education summit in Toronto, hosted by the World Innovation Network. They wanted Emma to speak on a panel titled "Rewriting the Future of Learning." The other panelists included a Nobel laureate, a former Secretary of Education, and the founder of an AI-driven curriculum company funded by Google. Emma didn't want to go. She hated public speaking, and worse, she hated feeling like a mascot. But Julian practically begged her. "This isn't about ego," he said. "It's about influence. We get more allies, we protect Orion." Ethan urged her to go. "You're literally changing the world," he said. "Tell them how." So she agreed. She flew to Toronto, her first time out of the country, with a suitcase half filled with documents and the other half filled with imposter syndrome. The summit was held in a glittering downtown convention center full of sharp suits and expensive shoes and people who spoke in terms like paradigm shifts and learning economies. Emma wore jeans and boots and a soft blazer and felt like a fraud. Until she started speaking. Until the moderator asked, "How would you define the purpose of school?" and she answered without hesitation, "To help a human become more human. And the system we have now doesn't do that." There was a pause. Then applause. Then more questions. And the next 40 minutes flew by in a blur of stories: Tyrell and the broken chair, Ethan and the Mars project, Aria and her podcast, Lucas and his timeline app. By the end, the audience was on their feet. People approached her afterward. Teachers with tears in their eyes. Developers asking for integration ideas. A principal from Brazil asking if she would mentor her through a similar launch. And then, as she was getting ready to leave, a man in a navy suit stepped forward and introduced himself as Jonathan Kim, one of Elon Musk's senior educational engineers at Neuralink. "Mr. Musk wanted me to tell you personally," he said, "that he's been following your progress closely. And he'd like to meet with you." Emma blinked. "In person?" "Yes," Kim said. "At Boca Chica. He wants to discuss a broader vision for integrating neural interfaces into exploratory learning models." Emma felt like the air had been knocked out of her. She barely managed to say, "I'd be honored." When she returned to Akron, she was different. Not louder, not prouder, but heavier, in a good way. She understood now that this wasn't just a pilot. This was a prototype. And it was being watched at the highest levels. She didn't tell the students about the Musk meeting yet. She didn't want to distract them. But they noticed something in her. A fire. A stillness. The building felt alive. Then, one rainy Thursday, something unexpected happened. Malik's app, originally designed for student energy tracking, got picked up by a local startup incubator that offered to help him turn it into a real product. At 14, he became the youngest founder in the program's history. When the news broke, local reporters came knocking. One article called Orion, the Elon Musk school. Another dubbed it, America's answer to Finland. The superintendent of Emma's old district issued a bitter press release accusing Orion of poaching talent and lacking oversight. Emma didn't respond publicly. Instead, she walked through the school that Friday afternoon, watching students huddled over blueprints, filming video essays, building electric circuits, rehearsing speeches. And she felt peace. The kind that only comes from living your truth so fully that the noise outside just becomes weather. Orion wasn't perfect. But it was real. And it was working. Emma Carter arrived at Boca Chica under a flat, endless sky streaked with orange and violet, the kind of sky that made everything feel both small and infinite at once. The SpaceX facility loomed ahead like something out of a science fiction film, all curved metal, glass panels, and the faint shimmer of desert dust clinging to polished chrome. She had flown in the night before and barely slept, her mind a carousel of questions. What would he be like in person? What exactly did he want? Why her? A black electric SUV met her at the gate and drove silently past rows of rocket components and engineers in sleek jumpsuits. Inside the main building, the air smelled faintly of ozone and coffee, and the walls pulsed with the quiet hum of data. Jonathan Kim met her in the lobby, tablet in hand. "He's in the simulation dome," he said. "He wanted you to see something first." They walked down a long, dimly lit corridor until they reached a circular room wrapped in LED panels and filled with holographic projections of planetary terrain. In the center stood Elon Musk, wearing a dark t-shirt and jeans, hands folded behind his back, watching a rotating model of a Mars base flicker in midair. "Emma," he said, turning slightly, voice calm but charged. "I've been looking forward to this." She nodded, stunned by the surrealness of the moment. "Thank you for having me." He gestured to the simulation. "This is what school should look like. A place where you solve real problems in real environments. Not just memorize answers to questions no one's asking." She stepped closer, eyes wide. The projection shifted, Martian soil layers, atmospheric density charts, time-lapse animations of agriculture pods. Students could learn planetary science, bioengineering, logistics, leadership, all in one module, he continued. And it's not hypothetical. It's purposeful. It's survival. Emma was silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "Orion was never just about school. It was about reminding people that learning has stakes." Elon turned toward her fully now. "That's why I reached out. The model you built, it's scalable. With neural interfaces and real-world integration, we can create adaptive learning loops that evolve with the student. Custom learning maps, dynamic content delivery, mission-based pedagogy. It's not just school. It's preparation for a multiplanetary species. Emma swallowed. That's a big leap. He nodded. All the good ideas are. For the next hour, they talked about cognition, curiosity, AI-assisted reflection, emotional intelligence, failure as feedback, resilience as a metric. Elon's mind moved like wildfire, sparking across topics, but always looping back to one core question: how do we raise thinkers who can survive not just Earth, but everything beyond it? Emma told him about Malik's energy tracking app. About Aria's podcast. About Lucas and his code. She described the way students entered Orion hunched and skeptical, and walked out upright, eyes alert, asking real questions. Traditional schools create compliance, she said. We want to create readiness. For anything. Elon nodded slowly, then said, we want to fund the next 3 campuses. Emma blinked. 3. Atlanta, Denver, Seattle, he said. We'll provide startup capital, AI infrastructure, and development teams. You design them. You lead. She stared at him. You want me to run 4 schools? No, he said, I want you to design a system that doesn't need you to run them. We build it right, and it runs itself. Distributed intelligence. Decentralized leadership. Like a neural net. Her heart raced. That's a lot. It's time, he said. The window's open. And it won't stay open forever. That night in her hotel room, Emma sat on the bed with her laptop open, staring at the offer sheet Julian had emailed. It was real. Generational funding. Full autonomy. But also a timeline. 6 months to design, hire, implement, and launch. Ethan FaceTimed her around 10. His face filled the screen, backlit by the warm light of Orion's open studio space. You okay? He asked. She smiled. I think I just agreed to change everything again. He grinned. You've been doing that since I was born. The next morning, she flew back to Akron and walked straight into the Orion building, where students were clustered around the giant whiteboard in the atrium, planning a showcase for local officials. They were calling it The Day School Fought Back, a tongue-in-cheek name for a serious presentation. Malik was leading logistics. Sophia was curating video segments. Ethan was building an interactive tour. Emma gathered the mentors that afternoon and told them everything: SpaceX, the offer, the expansion. Silence hung for a beat. Then Rainey said, so we're not just the pilot. We're the prototype. Emma nodded. And we've got 6 months to show the world it works. They got to work. Systems had to be documented. Processes written down. Training modules created. They hired a videographer to record every aspect of the school: class sessions, mentor reflections, parent interviews. Not for marketing. For blueprinting. For replication. Julian assembled a team of operations experts. Emma built the mentor onboarding guide. Ethan suggested they build a digital hub where students from each Orion campus could share projects and give feedback. They called it OrionNet. By the time the showcase arrived, the building buzzed with an energy Emma had never felt anywhere else. Over 300 guests showed up: parents, local leaders, journalists, even a delegation from the State Board of Education. The students ran everything. Tours, panels, presentations. No scripts. Just stories. Aria opened with a monologue about what it meant to be believed in. Malik demoed his latest app update, now using predictive analysis. Lucas gave a live coding session using neural prompts. Sophia read a poem she wrote about fear and failure and freedom. Emma watched from the back, heart in her throat. Afterward, a parent approached her, eyes glossy. You gave my kid back to me, she said. I didn't even know he was missing." That night, as the mentors cleaned up and the building slowly emptied, Ethan sat beside Emma on the floor in the central space. "Do you ever feel like it's too much?" he asked. She looked at him. "Every day." He nodded. "Same. But it's worth it, right?" She didn't hesitate. "Every second." Outside, rain tapped against the windows, soft and steady. The mural above them read, "What if school was designed for humans?" And for the first time, Emma felt like the world might finally start answering that question. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The success of the first Orion showcase did more than impress local officials, it sent ripples through the education world. Overnight, Emma and her team were inundated with messages from educators, parents, and students across the country, many desperate to start their own versions of Orion. The idea of a school that wasn't built around rigid schedules, standardized tests, or even grades, but instead around purpose, passion, and real-world impact, touched a nerve. At the same time, the traditional education establishment began to push back harder. Editorials appeared in major newspapers warning against the dangers of abandoning structure, and politicians questioned the oversight and accountability of what they called experimental schools. Emma knew this was only the beginning of a larger fight. One that would test everything Orion stood for. But inside the building, things were moving fast. The pressure to replicate the model while keeping the spirit alive became a constant tension. Julian had set up weekly calls with the new campus leads in Atlanta, Denver, and Seattle, and Emma was simultaneously overseeing curriculum design, mentor recruitment, and the rollout of OrionNet, the digital hub connecting all campuses. Each city brought its own challenges. Atlanta's cohort was younger and came from a more diverse, under-resourced background. Denver's students were highly competitive athletes who struggled to adapt to the open-ended style. Seattle's group had tech whizzes but fewer soft skills. Emma realized that scaling Orion wasn't about duplication but adaptation. The core principles remained: student agency, mentorship, interdisciplinary projects, but the execution had to be flexible enough to honor local culture and student needs. At the same time, Elon Musk's vision for integrating neural interfaces into learning was accelerating. Neuralink's development teams were working closely with Orion's tech mentors to pilot brain-computer interfaces that allowed students to navigate complex problem-solving simulations through thought and gesture, drastically reducing the friction between idea and action. The ethical questions, however, loomed large. Emma had long worried about the implications of neural tech in education. Was it enhancing genuine learning, or shortcutting it? Was it safe? Was it equitable? During a board meeting with Neuralink engineers, Emma voiced her concerns. If we rely too much on technology to deliver knowledge, we risk losing something essential: grit, reflection, the struggle that makes learning meaningful. Elon listened thoughtfully and then said, "Technology isn't a replacement. It's a tool. The goal is to augment human potential, not diminish it. We want students to face challenges, but with better resources and feedback loops." Emma wasn't fully convinced but decided to keep an open mind. She agreed to let a small group of volunteers pilot the interfaces under strict supervision. Among them was Grace, whose interest in AI ethics gave her a unique perspective on balancing technology and humanity. The pilot's results were promising but mixed. Students reported feeling more immersed and engaged, but some described an overwhelming sensory experience. Grace organized group reflections that turned into heated debates about privacy, autonomy, and the nature of intelligence. These conversations became a new curriculum pillar, emphasizing that technology is not neutral, it reflects our values and choices. Meanwhile, back in Akron, Orion's original campus was deep into its second year. The community had settled into a rhythm that was less chaotic, more confident. Teachers who had been skeptical now called themselves lifelong learners, mentors shared success stories at conferences, and students had started influencing district policies by showing what alternative education could look like. Emma spent mornings walking the halls, observing sessions, chatting with students and mentors, and occasionally stepping into the workshops to offer feedback. One afternoon, she found Malik hunched over his laptop, face creased with frustration. "What's up?" she asked. He sighed. "I'm stuck on scaling the app's backend for real-time data sync. It's slower than I want and users are complaining." She nodded. "Remember, growth takes time. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up." Malik smiled ruefully. "That sounds like one of your quotes." Emma laughed. The deep connection between students and mentors was the lifeblood of Orion, but it was also one of its biggest challenges. The emotional labor mentors carried was enormous, often without clear boundaries or support. Emma advocated for better mental health resources and peer support groups, but funding was always tight. Then came an unexpected breakthrough. Julian proposed partnering with a nonprofit that specialized in mentor wellness and resilience training. The pilot program launched with rave reviews, and within months, mentor turnover dropped significantly. Emma realized that to nurture students, they had to nurture the adults guiding them. On a different front, Lucas was working on an ambitious coding project to develop an AI-powered personalized learning assistant within OrionNet. The idea was for the assistant to learn each student's preferences, strengths, and struggles, and then suggest tailored resources, challenges, and peer connections. During testing, the AI surprised everyone by identifying hidden patterns in student behavior that correlated with emotional states, frustration, excitement, boredom, allowing mentors to intervene proactively. This breakthrough raised new ethical questions and required developing transparent protocols to protect privacy and agency. The students themselves became vocal advocates for these protocols, transforming what began as a tech experiment into a grassroots movement for digital rights in education. Throughout all this, Emma never lost sight of the bigger picture. She had moments of doubt and exhaustion, late nights filled with planning and paperwork, endless video calls, and the weight of responsibility for hundreds of young lives. Yet the sparks of transformation she witnessed daily, the way a student who once dreaded school now led a community project, or how a mentor helped a struggling learner discover a new passion, kept her going. Then came the most personal challenge Emma had faced since Orion's inception. Her mother, who had battled chronic illness for years, took a sudden turn for the worse. Emma juggled hospital visits and remote meetings, feeling torn between her roles as a daughter, leader, and friend. The school community rallied around her, organizing meal trains, coverage for her mentor sessions, and sending messages of support. It was in those moments that Emma realized the deep, intertwined nature of community, how education was not just about academic outcomes, but about human connection, empathy, and care. Her mother's recovery was slow, but steady, and it reinforced a core lesson Emma shared with her students: life's unpredictability requires resilience, adaptability, and a support system that feels like family. Near the end of the year, the Orion campuses held a joint virtual summit, streamed to thousands worldwide. Students presented projects that ranged from sustainable urban farms to open-source prosthetic designs to mental health apps powered by AI. The highlight was a live Q&A with Elon Musk, who praised the students for building the foundation of humanity's future. Emma watched the chat feed flood with comments from educators, entrepreneurs, and families, many pledging support or expressing hope for change. After the event, Emma sat with Julian on the rooftop garden of Orion's Akron campus, looking out over the city skyline lit with the warm glow of dusk. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked. Julian smiled. "Every day. But right now, I think we're doing exactly what we're supposed to." Emma nodded. "Sometimes it feels like we're building a spaceship on a moving train." He laughed. "Better buckle up, then." As she turned back inside, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Orion was no longer just a school. It was a movement. A beacon for anyone who believed that education could, and must, be reimagined for the future. The end of traditional education was not just predicted, it was unfolding, in real time, in classrooms and living rooms, through code and conversation, in the minds and hearts of a new generation ready to rise. And Emma Carter was ready to lead the charge. The pressure to innovate intensified as the new campuses matured. Emma's inbox overflowed with reports from Atlanta, Denver, and Seattle, success stories mingled with warnings of challenges threatening to unravel progress. In Atlanta, a lack of community resources made sustaining student projects difficult. Denver's athletes struggled to balance their sports commitments with the open-ended learning style. Seattle's tech-heavy students sometimes clashed with mentors over the school's non-hierarchical structure. Emma realized that scaling Orion meant confronting systemic inequalities and deeply ingrained cultural expectations about education. To address this, she initiated a series of community integration weeks, where students, mentors, and local leaders collaborated to identify resources, form partnerships, and co-design community-driven projects that aligned with Orion's mission. These weeks proved transformative. In Atlanta, students worked with local urban farmers and engineers to develop affordable, solar-powered irrigation systems. Denver's athletes learned to apply data science and physiology to optimize their training while supporting peers in art and social activism. Seattle students launched a nonprofit coding bootcamp for underserved youth, blending tech skills with social justice education. These projects redefined success beyond academics, they fostered empathy, leadership, and real impact. Emma watched as students who once doubted their potential blossomed into community changemakers. Meanwhile, Neuralink's neural interface pilot expanded. The technology improved, becoming less invasive and more intuitive, yet concerns about ethics, equity, and mental health persisted. Grace's leadership in student-led ethics forums helped create a culture of critical reflection around technology's role in learning. Emma often sat in on these sessions, struck by the maturity and insight of students debating autonomy, consent, and the future of cognition. It reminded her why education must always be about more than content, it must cultivate wisdom. Despite advances, not everyone was convinced. Traditional educators and policymakers criticized Orion for lacking standard benchmarks. Some accused it of elitism, arguing the model only worked because of Elon Musk's funding. In response, Emma and her team developed comprehensive impact assessments focusing on qualitative and quantitative outcomes, student engagement, creativity, emotional intelligence, community impact, and post-Orion success rates. Early data showed promising trends, graduates pursuing diverse paths including entrepreneurship, social work, STEM research, and activism, all attributing their success to Orion's flexible, purpose-driven education. But the fight for legitimacy was ongoing. One particularly contentious meeting with a regional education board left Emma drained but more determined. The board chairman bluntly said, "We can't afford to gamble on a model that doesn't fit into our accountability framework." Emma replied, "Orion isn't a gamble. It's an evolution. The old frameworks were designed for a different century. We need new metrics for new realities." Outside the meeting room, mentors and students waited, holding a silent vigil of support. This moment crystallized the broader struggle, the tension between revolutionary change and entrenched systems resistant to disruption. Emma spent late nights writing a manifesto, an urgent call for educational transformation rooted in humanity, creativity, and future readiness. The manifesto circulated widely online, sparking debate, hope, and resistance. Behind the scenes, Orion's tech infrastructure also evolved. Lucas and Ethan spearheaded the integration of virtual and augmented reality into project-based learning, creating immersive environments where students could prototype inventions, simulate social dynamics, or explore historical events from multiple perspectives. The lines between physical and digital classrooms blurred, opening new possibilities and raising fresh questions about presence, attention, and equity of access. Funding for technology remained a challenge, but partnerships with tech companies and philanthropic foundations provided critical support. One day, Emma received an unexpected message from an old friend and mentor, Dr. Helen Ramirez, a neuroscientist who had long studied learning and brain plasticity. Helen invited Emma to collaborate on a research project exploring how Orion's methods affected neural development compared to traditional schooling. Emma saw the opportunity to build scientific evidence that could bolster Orion's credibility and inform future innovation. Over months, the research team gathered data using non-invasive brain imaging, cognitive testing, and longitudinal tracking of students' emotional and social growth. Early findings revealed enhanced executive function, creativity, and empathy among Orion students, a compelling validation of the model's impact. The study gained media attention, attracting new supporters and sparking policy discussions. Yet Emma knew data alone wouldn't change minds overnight. Change required stories, voices, and relentless advocacy. She encouraged students to share their journeys publicly through podcasts, blogs, and talks. Their authentic stories of struggle, breakthrough, and hope resonated widely, humanizing the abstract debate about education reform. In the midst of this whirlwind, Emma struggled with personal challenges. Balancing leadership with family life remained a delicate dance. Her mother's health stabilized, but the experience deepened Emma's understanding of vulnerability, care, and priorities. She learned to delegate more and lean on her community, modeling self-compassion for students and staff alike. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings and travel, Emma found herself at a conference on the future of work. She listened as leaders discussed automation, AI, and the shifting demands of the job market. A recurring theme was the need for adaptability, creativity, and emotional intelligence, the very skills Orion cultivated. Backstage, she met a CEO who expressed interest in partnering to create internship opportunities for Orion students, providing real-world experience and expanding the network of impact. This connection reinforced Emma's belief that education and industry must evolve together, forming ecosystems that nurture lifelong learning and social responsibility. The year ended with a national gathering of Orion students and mentors, a celebration of milestones and a recommitment to the mission. The event was electric, filled with speeches, workshops, performances, and moments of profound connection. Students shared how Orion had transformed their sense of possibility and purpose. Mentors reflected on their growth and the challenges still ahead. Emma spoke last, her voice steady but passionate. "We're not just building schools," she said. "We're building a future where education empowers every person to navigate uncertainty, embrace complexity, and contribute meaningfully to the world. This is our moment. Let's seize it." As the crowd erupted in applause, Emma looked out at the faces of the next generation, the thinkers, dreamers, and doers ready to take on the world. She thought back to that first meeting with Elon Musk and the question that had driven her ever since: what if school was designed for humans? The answer was unfolding, chapter by chapter, project by project, connection by connection. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles, Emma was certain of one thing: education was no longer just about surviving the past, it was about thriving in the future. The momentum that Orion had gained over the past year was undeniable, yet the deeper Emma and her team delved into transforming education, the more complex the challenges became. The traditional system was entrenched, with decades of policies, funding models, and cultural expectations that weren't easily dismantled. Emma found herself increasingly torn between the urgency to expand Orion's influence and the need to respect the diverse realities of communities across the country. One afternoon, while preparing for a national education conference, Emma received a call from Julian. His voice was grave. "Emma, we've got a situation. The state education board just announced new regulations that could force us to close the Denver campus unless we meet standardized testing requirements." The news hit Emma like a thunderclap. Denver was one of Orion's most promising sites, with students thriving in ways no traditional school had seen before. But the new regulations demanded a return to old metrics, standardized test scores, attendance quotas, rigid curricula, that directly conflicted with Orion's philosophy. Emma convened an emergency meeting with campus directors, mentors, and legal advisors. They brainstormed strategies to comply without compromising their core values. Options included developing alternative assessments, lobbying policymakers, and mobilizing community support. But the path forward was murky and fraught with risk. Meanwhile, the neural interface pilots faced a new hurdle. Several students reported unexpected side effects, headaches, sensory overload, and emotional instability. Grace and the Student Ethics Board demanded a temporary halt and a transparent investigation. The media caught wind, fueling sensational headlines about mind control and education dystopia. Public opinion shifted, and donors began to question their support. Emma felt the weight of responsibility crush her. Balancing innovation with safety and trust was proving to be the tightrope she feared. In the midst of crisis, Emma turned to the students for guidance. She organized an open forum, inviting voices from every campus to share their experiences and concerns. The conversation was raw and honest, fear mixed with excitement, skepticism with hope. One student said, "Technology can't replace human connection. We need to remember why we're here." Another added, "Orion taught me to think critically, but that means questioning even the things we build." This feedback reignited Emma's conviction that education was an evolving conversation, not a fixed blueprint. She worked closely with the Neuralink team to improve safety protocols and enhance consent processes, emphasizing the need for student agency. At the same time, the legal and political battle over Orion's compliance escalated. The Denver campus temporarily halted admissions while negotiations with the Education Board played out. Emma mobilized allies, parents, students, community leaders, to advocate for flexibility and recognition of alternative assessments. A viral social media campaign, #FutureOfLearning, gained traction, drawing national attention and sparking debates in classrooms, newsrooms, and legislatures. In a pivotal hearing, Emma testified alongside students, describing how Orion fostered critical thinking, creativity, and emotional resilience, qualities that standardized tests couldn't measure. Her testimony was heartfelt and data-backed, a powerful blend of evidence and narrative. The hearing ended with a commitment from the board to explore pilot programs that included alternative assessments. The outcome was a partial victory but underscored the uphill battle ahead. On the technology front, Lucas and Ethan made breakthroughs in OrionNet's AI assistant, creating a system that could dynamically adapt to student needs without invasive neural tech. The new platform used data from project work, mentor feedback, and student reflection to personalize learning paths, balancing challenge and support. The rollout was cautious but successful, restoring confidence in technology's role in education. As the year progressed, Emma found unexpected inspiration in stories from the students themselves. Malik, who once struggled with coding, now led a cross-campus collaboration developing an open-source app to connect youth mental health resources. Grace's advocacy helped shape new ethical guidelines for educational tech. Lucas designed an augmented reality program that let students explore ecosystems in vivid detail. These stories illustrated a new truth. Education's future wasn't just about replacing old systems but empowering young people to solve real problems with creativity and compassion. Yet amid progress, Emma never lost sight of the personal costs. She grappled with burnout, the strains of leadership, and the persistent feeling of being a lightning rod for controversy. Her relationship with Julian deepened, offering moments of solace and partnership, but also revealing tensions as their visions sometimes diverged. One late night, after a particularly exhausting day, Emma confided to Julian, "Sometimes I wonder if we're moving too fast, if we're risking too much." Julian replied, "Change always feels that way. But if we don't push, who will?" Their conversation reminded Emma that transformation was a journey marked by doubt and resolve. Toward the end of the year, Emma was invited to speak at a global summit on education innovation. Standing on stage before thousands, she shared Orion's story. Not just its successes but its struggles and lessons learned. She emphasized that the future of education must be human-centered, equitable, and adaptive. Her closing words resonated deeply: "Education is not a factory line producing uniform outputs. It is a garden that must be nurtured with care, creativity, and courage. Together, we can cultivate a future where every learner thrives. As applause echoed through the hall, Emma felt a profound sense of purpose. The road ahead remained uncertain and challenging, but the seeds of change were planted. Education's end was not a collapse but a transformation, one that required vision, resilience, and above all, heart. The challenges Emma faced with regulatory pushback and neural interface controversies did not diminish the fire driving her vision. If anything, they sharpened her focus. As Orion's campuses continued to grow, Emma realized that transforming education required a broader cultural shift, not just new schools or technologies, but a collective reimagining of what it meant to learn, teach, and grow. One of the most profound moments came during a retreat organized for Orion's student leaders. Held in a remote nature reserve, the retreat was designed as a break from screens and schedules, a chance to reconnect with nature, themselves, and each other. The students gathered around a campfire as Emma shared the story of how Orion began, from a single idea sparked by Elon Musk's prediction to a movement challenging decades of tradition. Then she asked, "What does education mean to you?" Answers poured out: freedom, purpose, struggle, belonging, courage. A student named Maya, who had struggled with anxiety all her life, spoke about how Orion gave her permission to fail without judgment. Another, Jake, described how he'd found his voice leading a community project on homelessness. The conversation was raw and real, underscoring how deeply personal education was. Emma understood then that the fight was not just for systemic reform but for reclaiming education as a human experience. Back in the city, Emma and Julian launched a podcast series called Learning Unbound, featuring candid conversations with students, mentors, parents, and experts. The podcast became a platform for sharing stories that defied stereotypes, students who thrived outside traditional classrooms, teachers who embraced vulnerability and innovation, parents who wrestled with letting go of familiar models. Through these voices, the movement gained empathy and momentum. Technology continued to evolve alongside pedagogy. The AI assistant integrated emotional intelligence capabilities, recognizing when students were overwhelmed and suggesting timely breaks or peer support. Virtual reality simulations expanded to include collaborative problem-solving across campuses and even countries, connecting young learners in a global dialogue. These innovations blurred boundaries, but Emma remained vigilant about privacy and consent, embedding ethics as a core pillar. Meanwhile, partnerships blossomed beyond education. Local governments invited Orion to co-design community initiatives, blending youth leadership with civic engagement. Businesses collaborated on mentorship programs that prepared students for the evolving workforce without compromising creativity or agency. Nonprofits joined forces to expand access for marginalized populations. Emma's vision of education as ecosystem was taking shape. Still, not all was smooth. Financial sustainability loomed as a persistent concern. Reliant on philanthropic grants and tech partnerships, Orion needed a more robust funding model to scale equitably. Emma spearheaded efforts to diversify revenue through social enterprise, student-run ventures, consulting on alternative assessment, and licensing educational technology. These initiatives offered valuable learning experiences but added layers of complexity to an already demanding operation. On a personal level, Emma grappled with the isolation of leadership. Despite the supportive network around her, moments of self-doubt and exhaustion surfaced. She found solace in writing, journaling her fears and hopes. And in quiet walks through the city, observing everyday lives shaped by the very inequities Orion sought to change. One evening, after a long day, Emma received a call from her mother. Her voice was weak but warm. "I'm proud of what you're doing. Remember to take care of yourself, too." That simple reminder grounded Emma in the whirlwind. As the second anniversary of Orion's founding approached, Emma and Julian planned a global virtual summit to celebrate progress and chart next steps. The event would bring together thousands of participants, from students and mentors to policymakers and tech innovators. The summit theme was "Learning Without Limits." Months of preparation followed, with teams coordinating workshops, keynote speakers, and showcases. Emma's keynote focused on the interconnectedness of challenges and solutions, how education must address not only knowledge but emotional resilience, community, and ethical technology. She introduced a new initiative called the Compass Project, aimed at helping learners navigate uncertainty and complexity through personalized mentorship and adaptive learning pathways. On the day of the summit, the digital platform buzzed with activity. Interactive sessions covered topics from climate activism to AI literacy to restorative justice. Students presented groundbreaking projects, including a community microgrid powered by renewable energy and an app linking volunteers with elderly neighbors. Panels explored how to bridge divides, cultural, generational, socioeconomic, through education. During a live Q&A, a student asked Emma, "How do you keep going when the system feels so resistant?" Emma smiled, her voice steady. "Because every time I see a young person realize their potential, I remember why this matters. Change isn't easy, but it's possible. Together, we're rewriting the story." After the summit, Emma reflected on how far Orion had come. The movement was no longer just a radical experiment, it was influencing policy, inspiring educators worldwide, and changing lives. Yet the journey was far from over. Emma knew that transforming education meant confronting deep-rooted power structures, economic inequality, and cultural mindsets that resisted change. It meant embracing complexity, imperfection, and ongoing learning. She thought back to Elon Musk's original prediction and realized it wasn't just about ending traditional education, it was about beginning something new and better. A future where learning was joyful, inclusive, and empowering. With renewed resolve, Emma returned to her work. The road ahead would demand courage, creativity, and compassion. But as she looked around at the vibrant community Orion had built, the students, mentors, partners, and supporters, she was certain of one thing: the future of education was already being written, one story at a time. The dawn of the third year since Orion's inception brought both triumphs and new crossroads. Emma awoke early on a brisk autumn morning, her mind racing with possibilities and the weight of responsibilities. Across the campuses, a new wave of students arrived, filled with curiosity but also the skepticism that came from generations steeped in traditional schooling. Emma had learned that transforming education wasn't merely about innovation, it was about trust, connection, and persistence. That morning, she prepared to visit the Detroit campus, a site recently opened in a neighborhood grappling with economic decline and educational neglect. The stakes were high. Success here could prove that Orion's model transcended socio-economic barriers, but failure could reinforce critics' doubts. Upon arrival, Emma was greeted by Marcus, the Detroit campus director, a former public school teacher turned visionary. Marcus had spent months engaging with local families, community leaders, and organizations to build trust and tailor Orion's approach to Detroit's unique needs. Emma toured the campus, observing students collaborating on projects that addressed real community challenges, designing urban gardens to improve food access, creating art installations highlighting local history, and developing digital platforms for neighborhood safety alerts. The atmosphere was vibrant but also raw. Students voiced frustration about systemic neglect and their desire to reclaim agency. In a circle discussion, a teenager named Aaliyah shared, "School used to feel like a place where we just got judged, but here, I'm part of something bigger." Emma recognized that Orion was not just educating individuals but nurturing collective healing and empowerment. Later, in a one-on-one with Marcus, Emma probed deeper. "What's the biggest hurdle here?" she asked. Marcus sighed. "It's the lingering distrust. Of institutions, of change, even of ourselves. We have to meet people where they are and prove that education can be different." Emma nodded, realizing that the work ahead was as much about community rebuilding as pedagogy. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Julian and the tech team rolled out Orion's newest platform update, an AI-driven coaching system that combined data analytics with personalized human mentorship. The system aimed to balance technological efficiency with empathy, ensuring students never felt reduced to numbers. Julian emphasized transparency and student control over their learning data, addressing privacy concerns that had previously surfaced. Early feedback was positive. Students reported feeling supported rather than surveilled, empowered to shape their own paths. However, Emma was cautious. She knew technology was a tool, not a panacea. Later that week, Emma attended a symposium on educational equity. The keynote speaker, a respected sociologist, highlighted how systemic racism and poverty shaped educational outcomes in ways technology alone could not fix. Emma was reminded of Detroit's struggles and the importance of intersecting efforts, policy reform, community engagement, social justice, all woven into education's future. This realization prompted her to propose a new initiative within Orion, Roots and Wings. The program would integrate social justice education, trauma-informed practices, and community activism into Orion's core. The goal was to equip students not only with knowledge and skills but with the awareness and tools to challenge inequities. At the Detroit campus, Roots and Wings launched with a workshop series facilitated by local activists and educators. Students engaged in dialogues about history, identity, and power, linking personal experiences to broader social movements. Emma observed as students transformed from hesitant participants to passionate advocates. One afternoon, Aaliyah led a group in organizing a community cleanup and mural project celebrating neighborhood resilience. The project attracted media coverage and city support, highlighting how education could catalyze tangible change. Elsewhere, Orion continued to expand its partnerships. A collaboration with a major tech company provided internships and apprenticeships, blending real-world experience with Orion's flexible learning model. Students worked on cutting-edge projects in renewable energy, AI ethics, and social entrepreneurship. These experiences validated Orion's claim that learning outside traditional classrooms could prepare youth for complex futures. However, the tensions with educational authorities lingered. Several states remained skeptical, requiring rigorous proof before adopting alternative assessment models. Emma engaged in long negotiations, presenting data, research, and student testimonials. Progress was incremental but promising. Meanwhile, Neuralink's education pilot resumed after safety improvements. This time, the approach was more cautious, voluntary, and accompanied by extensive counseling. Students reported enhanced focus and creativity, but concerns remained about long-term effects and accessibility. Emma insisted on maintaining a student-led ethics committee to oversee developments, ensuring voices at the center of innovation. Amid these professional milestones, Emma's personal life evolved quietly. Her relationship with Julian deepened into partnership and friendship, anchored by mutual respect and shared vision. They celebrated small joys, weekend hikes, cooking experiments, moments of laughter amid chaos. Yet Emma also felt the pull of family ties. Her mother's health fluctuated, reminding her of life's fragility and the importance of balance. Emma strove to model self-care for the Orion community, advocating that well-being was foundational to learning and leadership. One evening, Emma sat in her office reflecting on the journey. The past 3 years had been a whirlwind of ideas, setbacks, breakthroughs, and growth. Orion was no longer just a radical experiment but a growing ecosystem influencing how society viewed education. Still, the road ahead remained daunting. Emma knew that transforming education was a marathon, not a sprint, a process requiring patience, humility, and unwavering commitment. She looked forward to a future where every learner, regardless of background, could find their unique path and thrive. The Detroit campus's success, the technology advances, the deepening community ties, all were chapters in a story still being written. Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Aaliyah, "Thanks for believing in us. We're just getting started." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of that truth. The future of education was unfolding, not in policy or technology alone, but in the hearts and minds of young people ready to change the world. Emma's work with Orion had grown beyond what she could have imagined in just 3 years. Yet as the movement expanded, she faced an unexpected new challenge, scaling without losing the deeply personal and human-centered approach that made Orion unique. The paradox was clear. How to grow rapidly while preserving the trust, connection, and flexibility that students and communities depended on. One afternoon, Emma met with the leadership team to tackle this dilemma. "We can't just duplicate the model and hope it works everywhere," she said. "Each community has its own needs, culture, and history. Our challenge is to grow Orion in a way that respects that." Marcus, the Detroit campus director, nodded. In Detroit, the key has been deep local engagement, listening and adapting. But that takes time and resources. Julian added, "Technology can help us scale some parts, like personalized learning platforms, but not everything. The human element is irreplaceable." They agreed on a new strategic approach: decentralization. Rather than centrally dictating programs, Orion would empower local campuses with resources, training, and autonomy to design education that met their community's realities while adhering to core values. Emma knew this would require a major investment in leadership development and mentorship, creating a network of trusted leaders capable of innovation and stewardship. The first step was launching the Orion Leadership Academy, a rigorous training program for campus directors and emerging leaders. The academy combined workshops on pedagogy, equity, technology, and community organizing with hands-on projects and peer mentoring. Emma personally mentored many of the first cohort, sharing lessons from her own journey and encouraging vulnerability and reflection. Meanwhile, the student body continued to thrive. Stories like Aaliyah's inspired others. Her work on community art and activism became a model replicated in multiple cities. Students across campuses collaborated on projects addressing climate change, digital literacy, and mental health. OrionNet, the AI platform, evolved with input from student councils, ensuring it remained responsive and respectful. But with growth came growing pains. Some campuses struggled with leadership transitions or local political resistance. Funding pressures intensified as donors sought measurable results and quick returns. Emma found herself negotiating delicate balances, between innovation and accountability, autonomy and unity, hope and realism. One particularly difficult moment came when a small campus in a rural town faced backlash after implementing an unconventional curriculum emphasizing indigenous knowledge and environmental stewardship. Local officials accused Orion of undermining state standards, threatening closure. Emma flew to the town to meet with community members, parents, and leaders. In heartfelt conversations, she learned that fears stemmed not only from educational norms but also from historical distrust and marginalization. Emma and the team worked to build bridges, hosting forums, inviting dialogue, and demonstrating respect for local culture and sovereignty. Eventually, the crisis eased, reinforcing Emma's belief that education reform must be rooted in cultural humility and partnership, not imposition. As the year unfolded, Emma also wrestled with personal questions about the broader implications of technology in education. While OrionNet and Neuralink pilots showed promise, concerns about surveillance, data privacy, and equity loomed large. Who controlled the data? How could misuse be prevented? Would access remain a privilege or become a right? Emma convened an ethics advisory board, including students, technologists, educators, and civil rights advocates. The board drafted guiding principles emphasizing transparency, consent, equity, and continuous review. Emma made these principles public, inviting feedback and fostering accountability. This move garnered respect but also skepticism from critics who feared that any technology in education was inherently risky. Amid these debates, Emma leaned on the stories of the students. She recalled Lucas, who had used augmented reality to explore ecosystems and inspire his peers. Grace, whose advocacy shaped ethical tech policies. Malik, who led youth mental health initiatives. Their voices reminded Emma that technology's role in education was not to replace humanity but to amplify it, when used wisely and with care. At a national education forum, Emma presented Orion's model as a case study in adaptive, equitable learning ecosystems. She argued that the future of education depended on partnerships across sectors: education, technology, government, and civil society, working together to address complex social challenges. Her speech resonated with many but also sparked heated discussions. Some educators feared that technology-driven models would marginalize teachers, policymakers worried about regulation and standardization, communities grappled with preserving cultural identities amid change. Emma welcomed these debates, seeing them as part of a vital democratic process. She emphasized the need for ongoing dialogue, experimentation, and humility. On a quieter note, Emma found renewed strength in her relationship with Julian. Their bond, forged through shared struggles and dreams, provided a sanctuary amid the storm. They celebrated small victories, a successful summit, a heartfelt student speech, a funding milestone, and comforted each other in setbacks. Yet they also recognized that their partnership was a work in progress, evolving alongside their mission. One evening, during a walk beneath city lights, Julian asked, "Do you ever wonder if we're really changing the system or just creating a new bubble?" Emma considered. Maybe it's both. Change is messy and nonlinear. But every seed we plant grows something different. That's worth the risk. As the year closed, Emma reflected on how far Orion had come. From a bold prediction by Elon Musk to a thriving movement, education was shifting. Yet the path forward was still uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities. Emma resolved to stay grounded in the core belief that education was about people, their stories, struggles, and dreams. And with that, the future was full of promise. Emma's vision for Orion had always been expansive, but now it was beginning to attract attention on an international scale. Invitations poured in. From educators, governments, and tech innovators around the globe, asking to learn about Orion's approach and explore collaborations. While proud of the growing influence, Emma felt the weight of responsibility acutely. Could Orion's model, deeply rooted in American cultural and social contexts, truly adapt to the diverse realities of other countries? Could the balance between technology, community, and ethics hold across vastly different political and economic landscapes? Emma decided that the next phase of Orion's journey would involve thoughtful, respectful international partnerships, true exchange rather than export. She traveled first to Finland, a country renowned for educational innovation and equity. There, she met with teachers and policymakers eager to hear about Orion's use of AI, decentralized leadership, and emphasis on social justice. The Finns shared their own experiments with student autonomy and holistic assessment. Over long dinners and classroom visits, Emma realized that while contexts differed, many challenges and hopes were shared. The conversations underscored the importance of cultural humility and collaboration. Emma's team began co-developing pilot programs in Finnish schools that integrated Orion's personalized learning technology with Finland's pedagogical values. The pilot emphasized student voice and well-being alongside academic growth. Early results showed promise, deepening Emma's confidence that the model could be adapted without losing its essence. From Finland, Emma journeyed to Nairobi, where Orion partnered with grassroots organizations working to improve education for marginalized communities. The contrast was striking: overcrowded classrooms, limited resources, and students grappling with economic hardship. Yet the determination was palpable. Emma was inspired by young leaders organizing community libraries, mobile learning labs, and peer mentorship programs. In Nairobi, Orion's technology had to be reimagined for limited internet access and intermittent electricity. The focus shifted to offline-first tools and solar-powered devices. Training emphasized capacity building and local knowledge integration. Emma was humbled by the ingenuity and resilience of the educators and students. She witnessed firsthand how education was inseparable from broader struggles for equity, health, and opportunity. Back home, Emma convened the first Orion Global Summit, bringing together representatives from all partner countries. The summit was a vibrant exchange of ideas, challenges, and stories. Sessions included cross-cultural dialogues on curriculum design, ethical AI, and community engagement. Students showcased projects addressing local and global issues, from climate justice to digital rights. The summit's energy was electric, an affirmation that education's future was inherently interconnected. Yet Emma was also confronted with difficult questions. Some attendees challenged whether a model birthed in a wealthy, tech-savvy context could avoid replicating inequalities when scaled internationally. Others warned of cultural imperialism masked as innovation. Emma listened carefully, acknowledging these critiques as essential to responsible growth. She emphasized the importance of ongoing dialogue, mutual learning, and shared governance. Amid this, Emma realized that Orion's commitment to equity meant constantly examining its own practices and assumptions. Technology's role was especially fraught. In many places, digital divides threatened to exacerbate exclusion. Emma's team doubled down on developing low-cost, accessible tools and open-source platforms. They also advocated for policy reforms to support infrastructure and digital literacy. The ethics board expanded to include global voices, ensuring diverse perspectives informed decisions. Throughout her travels, Emma was struck by a recurring theme: the power of stories. Students and educators everywhere sought not just new tools but recognition and respect for their histories and identities. Emma began collecting these narratives, envisioning a digital archive and storytelling platform to celebrate global learners' voices. She believed that stories could build empathy and solidarity across borders, vital for the collective reimagining of education. On a personal note, Emma found her worldview expanding and deepening. Encounters with different cultures and challenges stirred new reflections on privilege, power, and possibility. She kept a journal filled with sketches, quotes, and questions, a mosaic of insights guiding her leadership. Returning home, Emma was energized but aware that the journey was far from over. Scaling responsibly meant holding space for complexity, uncertainty, and humility. Emma understood that education was not a static product to be delivered but a living process shaped by diverse human experiences. As Orion prepared to launch a new phase of global collaboration, Emma gathered her core team. "Our goal," she said, "is not to impose a one-size-fits-all solution but to nurture networks of learning that honor context, culture, and courage. We must be learners as much as leaders." The team embraced this ethos, committed to co-creation and continuous reflection. In the months that followed, Orion launched localized versions of its platform, co-designed with partners to reflect cultural values and community priorities. Professional development programs emphasized intercultural competence and equity. Student exchanges blossomed, enabling young learners to connect and collaborate across continents. Media coverage highlighted Orion as a model for global education innovation, while critics continued to question technology's role and scalability. Emma welcomed the debate as part of a healthy, evolving dialogue. One evening, after a virtual meeting with partners in Brazil, Emma received a message from a teenage student in a remote village. She wrote about how Orion's tools helped her create a community garden that provided fresh food and learning opportunities for neighbors. "You helped us find our voice," the student said simply. Emma felt a surge of hope and gratitude. Education, she realized, was more than innovation or policy, it was about human connection, possibility, and transformation. Looking toward the future, Emma envisioned Orion as a network, not a fixed system, fluid and adaptive, grounded in shared values but open to change. Elon Musk's prediction of traditional education's end had sparked a revolution, but the story was still unfolding. The true promise lay in the hands of learners and educators worldwide, daring to imagine and build a better tomorrow. Emma closed her journal that night with a single line: "Education is a bridge, built by many, spanning continents, connecting hearts." The journey continued, with all its challenges and joys, as the future of learning took shape in real time. The glow of global recognition had elevated Orion's profile to unprecedented levels. Education ministers from several countries had reached out to explore full-scale adoption, and the media now framed Orion not as an experimental initiative but as a legitimate model reshaping the conversation about learning. Emma stood in the center of it all, no longer the hopeful founder navigating a storm, but a seasoned leader confronting the complexities of success. One morning, she sat alone in her office before sunrise, the skyline of the city still half asleep outside her window. Her desk was cluttered with papers, reports from pilot programs in India and Brazil, budget proposals from the Africa expansion team, and a legal draft from the ethics board on AI accountability. Despite the clutter, Emma felt a calm clarity. It was a moment she had always envisioned, Orion truly global, making a real difference. But it also came with a deeper realization. What they were doing could no longer be framed as just alternative. It was becoming the new standard. And with that came greater scrutiny, responsibility, and the need to ensure that power didn't corrupt the very mission they started with. The challenge was no longer just building the model, it was preserving its soul. That month, Emma proposed a bold shift in Orion's structure. Instead of operating as a centralized nonprofit guided by a tight executive board, she suggested transitioning to a global cooperative governance model. Each campus, regional hub, and partner organization would have voting power in collective decision-making. The goal was to decentralize authority and create a shared sense of ownership across the network. The proposal stunned even her closest advisors. Julian was hesitant. "It's visionary," he admitted. "But it's also risky. You'll be giving up control, Emma." She nodded. "Exactly. If Orion is truly about empowerment, it has to start with us. We can't preach equity and then hoard power." They debated for days, logistics, timelines, legal structures, potential internal conflicts. Emma listened to every concern but remained unwavering. She saw this as the next evolution of the vision, not just a school without walls, but a movement without gatekeepers. At the annual summit, she presented the proposal to thousands of attendees, live-streamed to partners around the world. "This is our chance," she said, "to do what traditional systems have failed to do, build education on shared trust, collaboration, and democratic values. This won't be easy. But it's necessary." The response was electric. Students cheered. Campus leaders, particularly those from marginalized regions, wept openly at the idea of having equal say. Critics voiced concerns about decision-making paralysis and governance gridlock, but the overwhelming sentiment was one of hope. In the months that followed, the transition began. The Orion Cooperative Council was formed, with regional assemblies and student representatives. Votes were cast not just on curriculum updates or tech features, but on core issues like AI use policy, mental health priorities, and ethical partnerships. For Emma, it was both exhilarating and terrifying to relinquish control. But it also brought unforeseen benefits. The Nairobi campus proposed a mental health toolkit rooted in indigenous healing practices, which was later adopted across several sites. A group of students in Berlin led a successful initiative to ban third-party data vendors from the Orion platform. In India, a regional council developed solar-powered offline learning hubs in rural areas using Orion's open-source framework. These innovations wouldn't have emerged from a top-down model. They came from collective intelligence and authentic ownership. But just as the network began to stabilize under this new governance, a fresh controversy emerged. A leaked internal document revealed that one of Orion's early corporate partners had attempted to influence the design of the AI assistant in ways that prioritized engagement time over well-being, essentially turning parts of the platform into an attention economy tool, similar to addictive social media platforms. The media pounced, painting the scandal as proof that even well-intentioned education models could be corrupted by tech industry interests. Emma was furious, not just at the partner but at herself. She had signed off on that partnership 3 years ago, never imagining such a manipulation could take root under their radar. Immediately, she ordered an independent audit of all tech features, cut ties with the partner, and held a global town hall with students and families. "This was a breach of our values," she said publicly. "And I take full responsibility." The transparency was praised by many, but trust had been shaken. Some campuses went temporarily offline, choosing to evaluate tools with their own local teams before resuming. The Cooperative Council demanded stricter oversight, leading to the creation of a global ethics tribunal, an elected body with the authority to investigate and suspend any partnership or policy found to be in violation of Orion's founding principles. It was one of the hardest months in Orion's history. Emma barely slept, haunted by the idea that something she built to liberate learning had, even briefly, mirrored the very systems it sought to dismantle. Julian comforted her late one night. "You faced it head-on," he said. "That's leadership. That's why people follow you." But Emma didn't want followers. She wanted equals, people who would question her, push back, co-create. In that spirit, she stepped down as Orion's executive director and accepted the new title of facilitator in residence. The cooperative elected a new rotating council of directors, half of them under age 25. Emma would stay involved, but her role would shift to mentoring, storytelling, and strategy. The announcement stunned the world. In an op-ed in the New York Times, she wrote, "Leadership must evolve with the systems we build. If education is to be democratic, so must its leadership. My stepping back is not an end, it's a beginning." That decision reignited global attention and inspired similar models in other social sectors: health, climate, justice. Emma became a quiet icon of decentralized leadership, and Orion continued to grow under the guidance of dozens of diverse voices. One of those voices was Aaliyah. Now 19, she had become a core member of the Ethics Tribunal, traveling the world to speak about youth empowerment and justice in education. On the anniversary of the cooperative's founding, she stood on the Orion Summit stage and addressed a crowd of 10,000. "We were told that young people had to wait to lead. That we weren't ready. But we are ready, because we have each other. Because we have Emma's example. And because we know what the future can be." In the audience, Emma smiled quietly. The story had grown beyond her. It now belonged to the world. A year had passed since Emma stepped down from her executive role, and yet her connection to Orion had never been deeper. Without the daily administrative demands, she found space to reflect, to mentor, and to simply listen. She visited campuses quietly, often unannounced, observing how the movement had grown and adapted under new leadership. What struck her most was how organically the core values had taken root in places she'd never personally touched: small villages in Ghana, mountain communities in Peru, urban neighborhoods in South Korea. In each location, the essence of Orion remained the same: learning driven by curiosity, shaped by community, and elevated by technology used with wisdom. On a visit to the original California campus, Emma sat in on a design lab run entirely by students. The topic: reimagining elder care through intergenerational learning. Teenagers shared plans for immersive VR histories recorded by local seniors, AI-driven companionship devices, and a mentorship exchange pairing students with elders to swap skills: coding for carpentry, history for digital art. The energy in the room was electric. Afterward, a 13-year-old named Sienna approached her and said, "My grandmother is my best friend, and I didn't realize that was rare until I started this project. Now I want to make sure nobody misses out on that kind of love." Emma was moved, not just by the idea, but by the confidence, the compassion, and the clarity of purpose. This was what Orion had always aimed for: students discovering the intersection between their hearts and their work. Across the globe, other projects reflected the same spirit. In Morocco, students developed a multilingual app that preserved endangered Berber dialects while teaching them to peers. In Thailand, a coastal community used Orion's tools to build an environmental monitoring network powered by student-designed sensors, helping track water quality and protect local fishing industries. In Mexico, a network of girls used Orion's mentorship system to break into STEM fields their schools had long overlooked. Emma spent much of her time gathering these stories, working on a book tentatively titled The Schools We Built Ourselves. It wasn't a manifesto, it was a mosaic, a tapestry of voices that told the true story of Orion not through data or strategy, but through lived experience. As she interviewed students, teachers, parents, and mentors, she asked the same question each time: when did you first feel free to learn? The answers varied in detail but shared a theme: the moment they stopped being measured and started being seen. While Emma worked on the book, the Global Council announced a new initiative called Orion Earth. It was an audacious plan to integrate climate education, sustainability practices, and eco-centric design into every part of Orion's global learning ecosystem. The goal was not just to teach climate science, but to build a generation of stewards, people whose education was rooted in planetary care. Under Orion Earth, campuses launched permaculture gardens, created local climate response teams, and redesigned their facilities to become carbon negative. Students became citizen scientists, tracking climate shifts, proposing mitigation strategies to local governments, and even building prototype clean energy solutions. Emma, who had always felt the urgency of the environmental crisis, supported the initiative wholeheartedly. She volunteered to co-develop a new virtual learning expedition, an immersive experience where students could travel through time and ecosystems, seeing the impact of human choices on the planet. The simulation, titled Seasons of Tomorrow, blended historical storytelling, scientific modeling, and creative problem-solving. Within a month of launch, it was used in 32 countries. One night, as she tested the simulation in beta with a group of students in Australia, a boy named Kai asked her, "Do you think we still have time to fix everything?" Emma paused, then said, "Maybe not everything. But every piece we heal matters. And that's more than enough reason to try." The work gave her renewed focus, but not without cost. Emma's mother, whose health had slowly declined, passed away quietly in her sleep. Emma was by her side. The loss was profound, even expected. In the days that followed, she took time off, something she rarely allowed herself. She spent quiet weeks in the home where she'd grown up, sorting through old books, letters, and family photographs. She found a note her mother had written years ago but never sent. It read, "Emma, you always dreamed bigger than the world was ready for. But maybe that means you were never meant to fit in it. Maybe you were meant to change it." Those words stayed with her. When she returned to the Orion network, it was with a different kind of energy. Not the fire of urgency, but a steady warmth. She began mentoring a new generation of facilitators, young, driven, deeply idealistic. Among them was a 19-year-old from Lebanon named Noor, who had already launched 2 education programs for displaced youth. Another, Marcus's niece Joelle, had developed a peer-led restorative justice curriculum now used across 5 continents. Emma no longer led with instruction, she led with questions. "What does liberation look like here?" she would ask. "What's the risk no one wants to name?" Her role shifted from founder to storyteller, from architect to elder. She became a bridge, a living memory of how Orion had begun, and a gentle nudge toward what it could still become. During a gathering of the Cooperative Council, held for the first time in person on a floating solar-powered campus off the coast of Portugal, Emma gave a short, impromptu speech. She stood on the deck under a starlit sky and said, "We were once told the system couldn't be changed. That learning had to look like it always had. But we dared to imagine something else. And because we imagined it, we built it. Now the question is, what will you dare next?" There was no applause, just a quiet reverence, followed by open dialogue that went on late into the night. In the silence of the early morning hours, Emma watched students sketch plans for new initiatives, prison education partnerships, indigenous-led curriculum councils, mobile learning hubs for climate migrants. She smiled, knowing that her chapter was slowly closing, but the story was far from finished. Orion wasn't just alive, it was alive in ways she'd never expected. It had outgrown her. And that, she thought, was the point all along. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?